Hello guys, welcome to Bit Byte Kilobyte. This is Arjun. This is my first video in this channel, or rather first tutorial in this channel. So I'd like to spend a couple of minutes to tell you what is this channel going to be all about and what I will be doing in this channel and how it can be beneficial to you. A bit of introduction of myself. My name is Arjun. I am a software engineer by profession. I have 12 years of experience in IT industry. Currently, I'm a manager at a multinational company and serving my public sector clients in US. But when I think back of my college days, I feel like if there's a teacher who can help you and walk you through uh, during your learning curve, it is much more easier to achieve or get results in a short period of time rather than reading like hundreds of pages of a book. So this is my first attempt to that. I will be trying to teach you C sharp over the next a dozen of short videos. Each video will cover one topic, which you can consider as like one chapter. Of course, it will not cover all 300 pages of a book that you might have, but it will give you a very good understanding of what is C sharp, why would you code in C sharp, how to code in C sharp. And by the end of this tutorial series, you will be able to at least write good object-oriented C sharp programs. If you are trying to get into Microsoft domain, or if you are trying to learn Microsoft technologies, I would say C sharp should be one of your first languages to learn, which if you learn, you will be able to code not only for like simple console applications, but also web applications as well as Windows applications. Okay, so what are the prerequisites that you need to have to be able to understand this video and this learning tutorials? So first, I will expect that you are fluent with using Windows as an operating system. You know how to open an application, how to download application, etc., etc. I would also expect that you have done some form of coding before, either in your school or in a college. You might have coded in BASIC or maybe C language, etc. And at the end, I also need you to have basic understanding of MS-DOS commands, how to navigate between directories, how to list contents of directories, etc. Now let's talk about how the course will be structured. So this course will be divided into two parts. One is the foundation and second, the advanced. The foundation course will help you to learn C sharp from scratch and will bring you to a position where you can write C sharp applications efficiently. Once you're done with the foundation, we will move on to advanced C sharp, and there are a couple of topics that we will cover here. We are today here at lesson one, where we'll talk about introduction and getting started. Introduction is already covered by now, and so we will jump to getting started. So first we'll cover what are the tools that you will need to write a C sharp program. Next, we will write our first Hello World application, which we typically do for any while learning any programming language. So Hello World application is the way to go here as well. And we will write our very basic Hello World application with minimal amount of coding so that you get a sense of how easy it is to learn C sharp. Once you have done that, we will show you how to run your program from within Visual Studio and also from Windows without using Visual Studio. Next, we will talk about very basics of .NET Core. What is .NET Core, right? How it is different from .NET Framework. So I will give you a very brief introduction to that so that you know what is .NET Core all about. One more thing I wanted to point out, throughout the course, you might feel that I'm skipping certain things or telling you that I will cover later on. That is because I don't want you to be digressed or get into too much detail. So just have patience. I will cover those in subsequent videos. Now, C Sharp is an object-oriented programming language that we are going to learn. Since you might not be aware of object-oriented programming language, so let me give you a brief intro on the difference between a procedural programming language like C basic, etc., versus an object-oriented programming language like C Sharp, Java, etc. And then we will move on to the tools and we'll see how to install Visual Studio. So we have two main types of programming language. One is called the procedural programming language. The other one is object-oriented programming language. So procedural programming language, the focus is about the steps that you need to perform to start with some goal and to reach to that goal. So you will start here and then you will go to step one. You need to do step two. And then finally, at step N, you actually get the output that is needed. So if I say an example for this, maybe if I tell you how, the steps to go make a cup of tea, that's an example of procedural language. I will tell you, okay, go get the saucepan, put some water in it, boil it, etc., right? My focus is on getting the tea done, right? So procedural programming languages are more fit for writing applications which don't really interact with real world entities. For example, writing a device driver, right, which needs to be a very small program that will go inside a chip, for example, right? So very low level programming, even today, are done in procedural languages like using Objective-C, etc. In object-oriented programming language, however, the focus is on objects and how do objects interact with each other and so on and so forth. Let me explain it a little bit more. So say, for example, I have a very ugly looking car here, which doesn't have tires. Okay. Now this is I will call this as an object because it is indeed an object, right? Now suppose you have tires here, right? So these tires are objects of their own. So there are two tires, one car. This is a car object and this is a tire object. Now, what we can do is in object-oriented programming, we can represent that how we will fit these two together, right? So in object-oriented programming language, if we want to represent this situation, we will have a class or an object of car type, and there will be an object of type tire, and there will be an object of type mechanic. Now, this mechanic will have a method called fit tire. So method are nothing but these steps basically, which now has gone inside an object because this is object-oriented programming language. So he will have steps within that method or within that function to fit a tire. So we will call this fit tire method. Now, what we will do is in real life, when we build an application, we will pick up this mechanic object and say that, hey, mechanic dot fit tire. Then the mechanic will go and install these tires down here, right? Now the car will kind of look like this with the tire fitted into it. Now, once this is done, the car object may have a method called run. Now we can run that method saying car.run. Then what will happen is magically your car will start running. Very confusing? Don't worry. We will get into more details of this and what we are trying to do. All I'm trying to show you here is what is the difference between a procedural language versus an object-oriented language. In procedural, the focus is on the process. The focus is on the steps. In object-oriented programming language, the focus is on the objects and their interaction with each other. And within them, we have snippets of code within a block called functions. And these functions contains such steps which this object will perform to achieve something. So the entire programming is modeled like something that you are doing in real life. That is called object-oriented programming language. Now let's move on to install Visual Studio. I will tell you where to download it from, and I will put the links also in this video's description. But I will also walk you through what are the options you need to select to set it up and start a brand new project. So the first step is to get started with downloading the Visual Studio editor. So once you put Visual Studio here, you'll get the results. Click on that. Here, what you need to do is you need to select edition of Visual Studio. So if you select any of these two, you'll need a license for this. Since you are going to use it for your own purposes and not for any commercial purposes, you can download the community edition. Once you do that, the download will start. Again, this download, as you saw, this completed real quick. This is not actually installing it, but just downloading the setup file. Once you click on this, the Visual Studio installer will get started. So you hit next here. I will just fast forward this part. Then you are presented with this screen. So here you need to select what are the tools that you want to install as part of this installation. So my purpose, so for my need, for our need, we will install C Sharp or .NET development. And I will also go ahead and select ASP.NET. So it's not something that you need to worry about. And there are a few other options which you can select, but for now, these won't be required for you. So once we select these two, we can go ahead and start install. You can see the amount of disk space that will be required to install, and these are the components that will be installed. Now the installation process will continue, and this is going to take some time. So I will fast forward this again. Now that your Visual Studio is installed, you must be seeing a shortcut here. In case you don't see the shortcut, you can just click on the Start menu and start typing Visual Studio, and it should pop up right on the top. And this is what you are presented with when Visual Studio opens up. So from here on, you can create a project right from here, create a new project. Right. So here it will show you what kind of projects that are possible here. So since we want to do a simple console application, which is kind of a DOS mode application, right? We will select the first option and hit next. Here you need to give a name for your project. So for our purposes, we will call it my first hello world. Once we give the name, you will see there's a solution that gets created for you. Solution is nothing but a container for your project. We'll see that in a bit. One solution can have multiple projects inside it. Okay, so then we hit next. It tells you which framework to choose. We are going to choose 5.0, which is the latest .NET Core framework, and hit create. So once your solution is fully loaded, this is how it opens up. It will have a solution explorer here, which will tell you details of what all files are there in your solution. By default, the solution or project opens with a file called program.cs. And this is the structure which Visual Studio has already created for you. At this point, we are all set. This is the first program, and you didn't have to write a single line. So what we'll do here is we'll build and we'll build solution. Now that we were able to successfully build, if there was any build issues, you would have seen a pop-up here. Let me introduce one here. Suppose I remove this semicolon from here. Now, if we start building it, it will give an error. It will pop up and show you that a semicolon is expected here. So you put the semicolon back and it goes away, right? So let me start building again. Now this time the build succeeded, right? Once the build has succeeded, you have already created your first application. So that was your Hello World application. That was straightforward, simple. Now let's move on to run the application from Visual Studio as well as from outside Visual Studio. All you need to do now is to just run it. You can run it from here. Just click on this. The command prompt will open up, and here it goes. Your Hello World application gave its output. Now let's look into what these lines of code are doing. We will get into the details of what is this main function, what is this program, what is this namespace in subsequent chapters. But for now, let's just talk about this line. So this is the line which is actually responsible for printing what you just saw on the screen, the hello world message. What it is doing is it's saying console, which is the black screen which you saw, which we call a console, write line. So here, as I told before, console is an object, which is a real life object, right? A black screen. So this object has a property called writeLine, which has the statements that needs to be executed to print something on the screen. So this function takes an argument. This is called an argument. And this argument tells you that you need to write hello world on the screen. And that's exactly what happens when we run the program. It just prints hello world. Okay. Now let me change or add another line here and see how it behaves. I call it hello world 2. Now if we run, it will execute these two statements, and hello world and hello world 2 both will be printed. Let me take you to the place where we have this piece of code or the executable. So here you can see this is my project directory. Inside this, you will find a folder called bin. Inside that, you will have a folder called debug. There you will see net 5.0. You go inside that. Here you will find a file which is of type application. An application file means it's an executable file, right? So now if you double click on this, it will run from here as well. But as you saw, it just came and went away. That is because Visual Studio is not helping you to run it. Here, if you see the output in detail, this is the output from your program. And this black screen still stays for you because Visual Studio is helping you by holding it until you press a key. When you press that key, that goes away. But when you're running it from Windows, Windows is not helping you. Windows is just running the program and going away. It's coming and going away so fast that you can't even see the output. So what I will do is, I will call another method of console, which is nothing but console.readKey. Here you go. Once you do this, now when you run this program, it will build and run, and it will show the output and wait for you to press a button. Now Visual Studio again kicks in and holds it on until you press the cross button or press another key. Now what it has done is, it has not changed much when you run from Visual Studio, but now if you go and run this program from Windows, it will not go away in a flash. It will display the output and wait for you to press a key, and then it will go away, right? So what we understood from here is Visual Studio is an application which facilitates your coding. It allows you to build with clicks. It allows you to run by clicking a button. All this can be done even without Visual Studio. You can do it from command line arguments, but it is much more hectic to do it that way. That's why Visual Studio is there to help you out there. But no way Visual Studio is required to actually run your program. Once the program is compiled, you can run it from within Windows as well. This is something that you will give to your clients. You are not going to tell your clients that, hey, you need to install a 10 GB Visual Studio to run a program which is just 123 kilobytes, right? So you just pick up this thing and give it to your clients, and they can double click on it and run it. So far we have covered how to set up Visual Studio, how to get going with your first project, how to write a Hello World application, and we saw how to run that. Now let's move on to seeing what is .NET Core and what are some of its features. So as you can see in this diagram, which I pulled from Microsoft's website, this is how the .NET Core platform looks like. So we had something called .NET Framework till very recent. And now Microsoft is moving from .NET Framework to .NET Core. So why is it so, right? So .NET Framework was predominantly a Windows-based programming language. You could only do programming in Windows and host on a Windows server. That was one of the very big demerits compared to Java, which was platform agnostic. You can run Java on your cell phone, you can run Java on your Windows, as well as you can run Java on Mac and other devices. Now with .NET Core, Microsoft has achieved the same. .NET Core can run in Visual Studio for Windows. It can run on Visual Studio for Mac. There are other editors like Visual Studio Code from which it will run as well. And of course, there is command line interface from where you can run it. So .NET Core has made things much more simplistic, lightweight. The output of .NET Core can be deployed into Windows servers. It can be deployed into Linux servers, and the development can also happen in all these different platforms. So that's a big change in the framework itself. So that's why it is called .NET Core. .NET Framework, the last update from .NET Framework was version 4.8. After that, .NET Framework is gone. So that's why in these tutorials, we will use .NET Core. The three boxes that you see here are the infrastructure for .NET Core to run. You don't need to worry about these, but this is something that happens under the hood. You have something called runtime components, right, which helps your code to run on the machine where it is running. You have compilers, the piece of code that actually compiles your code or changes your code from the C# language to machine understandable language. And then you have the different languages, right? The language which we are going to use is C#. So that was it for today's introduction and getting started. I hope this video was useful to you. We talked about how to set up Visual Studio. We wrote our first Hello World application. We ran it from Visual Studio and outside Visual Studio, and we got a very high level understanding of what .NET Core is. So before we wrap up, let's talk about what we will be covering in our next class. We'll be covering C# basics in our lesson 2. There we will cover first some IDE debug features. So next we'll move on to a structure of a C# program. When you create a project, what are the files that got created today, right? So we'll talk more about those. Then we'll move on to different data types that C# supports. What are those? And then we will end our lesson 2 with some common library methods that we will be using throughout our course. Before we wrap up, just an earnest request to you all. If this video was helpful to you and you feel that this course is going to be helpful to you, I would require your support. I'd require you to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. Thank you again for staying back with me. Talk to you in the next class. Bye bye.